Okay, let's move on with the agenda then. First item on the agenda is consent calendar. How would you like to proceed, council?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the consent calendar as submitted. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes. Next item is presentations, Marshfield High School update. Kiri Goodson, there you are. How are you? Come on up.
Very well.
Tell us what's going on. I know you guys are always busy over there.
Very much so. Oops, sorry.
No, it's no problem. Good to see you here.
I'm really excited to be here, actually. Here are my script. I'll lower this because I'm short. Well, first of all, I want to say good evening to everyone. Council members, thank you so much for having me today. I am Kiri Goodson. I am a 17-year-old junior at Marshfield High School. I am the past immediate vice president of Key Club, as well as the president of our Z Club. We have a lot of things happening at Marshfield right now, being that it's the spring term and almost the end, especially of junior year. Whew. And I just want to give you a little update. So first of all, we have a very successful track program, and they just competed at Roseburg Twilight Invitational, which had over 35 teams, and we took fourth overall, which is really exciting. And we will have several athletes competing in the athletic.net relays, and which is one of the biggest meets of the year. So that's a huge honor bestowed upon us. Our ASB will be holding a Fun on the Field this Thursday, which is a huge Marshfield tradition that we've not been able to have since my 8th grade year. So I've never been able to compete or participate in Fun on the Field because of COVID. And it's being established this year, which means that I get to partake in a big Marshfield tradition, which is a huge honor. And of course, one of the best things of the year, prom is coming up, which is this April 29th. And the theme is A Night in Greece, which is going to be great. So it's going to be all Grecian and columns, not a toga anything, unfortunately, but you know, it's going to be fun. The Marshfield Choir just made it to state for the first time in a long time, which is also really cool because I'm a big member of choir. I love choir. I'm the president of our choir department. And we have a fundraiser coming up. We have a musical theater showcase fundraiser at Front Street Provisioners this May 19th, and I do have a flyer if anybody's interested. And there'll be a large selection of different types of musicals, upbeat, slow, sad, happy, whatever you like. The Z Club is also in the process of finalizing a project with Oregon Community Foundation to allot $5,000 worth of money to nonprofits in our community dealing with substance abuse and prevention of said substance abuse. We've had presentations from HIV Alliance, Friends of Coos County Public Health, and the Waterfall Clinic, and expect 3 more at the end of this week. Next week after that, we are deciding who to allot the $5,000 worth of money amongst the many grant applicants. We also have had a slight miscommunication with the school venue that we're choosing to do it at. It's planning to be in, or we have a silent auction coming up, and we've had a slight communication error, and we have had to move this back. So I know that Harper Thompson has discussed that with you guys in the past. And if you don't know, the silent auction is a benefit that's focused on helping Together We Rise, a nonprofit organization that funds resources to help foster youth get out of foster youth and become strong and capable adults, as well as Every Child Oregon. So that is now scheduled to be in mid to late May. Last but certainly not least, we have Key Club, which is also a big part of my life. Key Club has just now had our new elections, electing Harper Thompson as the president. We have also appointed a new secretary and 10th grade representative. We have a big project coming up, which is our food pantry project box. And we have now partnered with Gloria Day Lutheran Church to provide food and necessities, health necessities to low-income families and homeless in need. I would love to answer any questions you all have as of now.
Any questions, council? Comments?
Well, you are so well spoken,
Thank you.
and you're obviously very busy. You're the president of 3 different organizations and the past president of another organization. So, well, congratulations to you. I think this is the first time you've been in council chambers. So, thank you for being here, and I hope we get to hear more presentations from you in the future.
Thank you.
I'm always impressed. And you are doing so much up there, and it's always great to hear. So, and thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing you again, hopefully.
I would love to.
All right, good.
Thank you so much.
Anytime. Thank you. Okay, the next presentation is by Bay Area Hospital President, CEO, Ryan Moore. Welcome, Ryan.
Good evening, councilors and mayor. Nice to have a few minutes to update you on goings-on at Bay Area Hospital. I was a little surprised at the balance of North Bend conversations as we opened the Coos Bay City Council meeting. Bay Area Health District is organized in a way that unites these communities. Lakeside, North Bend, and Coos Bay are all constituents of our health district. And the hospital is having quite a time, like the healthcare industry across the country, in navigating this nasty tale of COVID, which is really more about the workforce and financial impact than it is managing the disease this time. I've got just about 9 or 10 slides, and we'll spend a few minutes. I'll turn on the remote control and advance. So I think it's really helpful to have some context. Of course, I live in healthcare, so I'm tuned in to all of those headlines. But I picked some headlines from really kind of the last 6 to 9 months here. You look at some of the challenges here in the Pacific Northwest. You see, going back a little over a year ago when we had our big Omicron surge, it threatened to put the whole state into crisis care. We saw that actually happen in Idaho as the healthcare system was just overwhelmed from COVID patients. And then we saw more and more financial headlines, and some of the larger healthcare organizations here in the Pacific Northwest. When you look at the national level, some of the big footprints that you see, companies that have a multi-state presence, also struggling to get real-time profitability and workforce solved. And often in healthcare, you think about health systems and scale serving as a buttress when it comes to some of those financial challenges. But again, you look at the headlines, things like Common Spirit, Cleveland Clinic posting big billion-dollar losses, and you see hospitals, small, independent, like Bay Area Hospital, also in the headlines with financial challenges. So let's look a little bit more at Oregon. Here's some information put out by the Hospital Association. Hospitals in Oregon report into a group called a prize, and allows us to aggregate our hospital data and share that from the state of Oregon perspective. You can see the operating and total margins there in the left hand. You know, we saw some federal funding that really stood up hospitals in the middle of the pandemic, but as that evaporated, you see hospital profitability just plummet and cross the positive line down into the negative. You can see another look at that red line there is the expenses overtaking both operating and patient revenue. And anytime your expenses are more than your revenue, you are headed for some real challenges. Now, something that many people may not understand, Bay Area Hospital and many hospitals, a lot of our revenue is paid for a patient's visit. So we know that law of large numbers, when you come in with a specific condition, we're probably going to get you home in 3 or 4 days. We know you're going to spend some time maybe in the operating room. You're going to need some of these procedures. And so Medicare started this 20 or 30 years ago, and based on that diagnosis, there's one payment. And what we saw during the pandemic, some of our partner organizations, skilled nursing homes, skilled care facilities, rehab facilities, had some of the same challenges that many of us did in our businesses, whether healthcare or otherwise. And at the hospitals, those patients, most people who visit us, we get to send them home. But some of them need an intermediate step, right, in their recovery. And those patients may not have a home environment that's conducive to their recovery. Maybe they don't have support personnel. And so we depend on these intermediate steps to move people out of the hospital so that we can open up that bed to somebody who just got sick. Well, we saw skilled nursing really come to a grinding halt, and that meant patients got stuck in the hospital. We saw 400, 500, 600 patients across the state stuck. They're done with their acute hospital stay. They've recovered. They're ready to move to that next setting, except it's not available. Well, in that scenario, we have all of the costs that go to care for that patient for that additional day or two in the hospital, but zero additional revenue to cover those costs. So it talks to the interconnection of the healthcare system and was a significant contributor to some of our challenges. So now we're zeroing in on Bay Area Hospital and looking at our financial performance. Healthcare is a really interesting industry in that we're both capital intensive. We have really expensive facilities and equipment that we provide nurses and physicians with, and we have high labor costs. We've got the luxury of both. Our labor cost, that lower left-hand document, had been stable for years at about 50% of our net revenue. And this particular look is 12 months rolling. So we go back 12 months, and each month we take a new 12-month look. So it kind of smooths out the month-to-month variance, but you can see how stable that was, 2018, 19, 20. Then we get into 21, and you see it go from 50% of our net revenue up to 80% of our net revenue. A significant increase in our personnel expense, and also driven by some decrease in our revenue. In the upper right-hand kind of orange line there, you can see the profitability of the hospital kind of bouncing around the zero line, some months a little above, some months a little bit of loss. Again, this goes back to 2017 through more recent end of calendar 22. And then as we get into calendar 22, kind of the bottom just falls out, kind of following some of those larger headlines. Talk a little bit about our labor. This starts in the first quarter of 2020. We'd really gotten focused and had seen some real uptick and positive movement in the hospital's ability to both retain our staff and to recruit staff. The bottom line looks at just nurses, and the upper graph looks at all staff. And that red line is folks who are leaving the organization, and the blue line are new hires into the organization. So you can see quarter 2020, we were making a significant net gain and really filling some kind of long vacancies that we had from a nursing perspective. You can see we kind of increased and then stabilized with our turnover, people leaving the organization, and our ability to hire decreased significantly. We reached this capitulation point at the end of calendar 21. We just saw a massive exodus of staff and nurses at the hospital. And over this last year, we have begun to regain our ability to refill some of those positions. You see that blue line climb up above and begin to stabilize on the red line with people leaving the organization. So I'm very encouraged to see that. We've seen a little bit of a slowdown as we got into the holiday quarter of the beginning of the year here, but we're hoping that we can regain that kind of new hire activity and keep that turnover number lower. Bay Area Hospital was a rock in the midst of the pandemic. And I just wanted to remind the council and some of those watching some of what I think our milestone moments were when it came to supporting this community through the pandemic. We got locked down in early 2020. Coos County, thankfully, barely saw a COVID case in the entire calendar year of 2020. But that changed in 2021. We had our first surge in the Delta surge. That was August and September. And at that point in time, it was still almost impossible to get a COVID test. And one of the things that we were able to do was redeploy some of our staff, and we opened up a free COVID testing clinic. I talked to community members. They sometimes came through twice a week just to make sure they were clean for their family or for their business or events that were going on. And in just a matter of minutes, families worried about their school kids, where again, they couldn't get a test, they would come through and make sure their kids were safe to go to school. We provided that for free. And it was our staff who made that testing available. Over 4,000 tests we administered in that span of that surge. When we first got the vaccine, we did mass vaccination events, and I think we provided over 10,000 vaccinations. I don't know. Oh, COVID dollars spent. We were the recipients of some pretty significant COVID funding. We received about $18 million and just wanted the community to have a sense of where that went. A lot of that money, 82% of that money, went right back into staffing. That included things like overtime for our existing staff, included a COVID appreciation and retention bonus for our staff. I think that was about $3 million spread out over about 3 or 6 months. We also invested in a lot of temporary staff to stay open for care and hope to make sure that our staff weren't overwhelmed as we had these vacancies and the increased need in the community. We served as a regional COVID receiving hub for many of the critical access hospitals, worked very closely with Bandon and Coquille and Reedsport. For that first Delta surge, we were able to take almost all of their COVID patients and keep them here. When we got into the Delta surge in the early 22, everything was overwhelmed, and we ended up swapping. So we worked very collaboratively. We would send lower acuity patients from our facility to the critical access hospitals so that we could try to keep those higher acuity beds open for surgical or COVID patients and really work together as a health system across the community and health district boundary lines. We're in a recovery right now from that financial hit. The first thing that we're focused on is regaining positive cash flow. I can tell you we have made significant strides in reducing our losses. I can tell you we're still running a loss right now, but I'm very encouraged by the positive movement. We've got to stabilize and rebuild our workforce. It's exciting to see us with net hires over the last 9 to 12 months. We've got to rebuild our workforce and then expand access to local care. And of course, that means a lot of things, whether you're new to the community and you need a primary care physician, or whether something's going on and you need to get urgently for a test. We know that both of those things are important for our local constituents. You know, on the South Coast, and by South Coast, I mean California to Florence, Bay Area Hospital's the only place to have a baby in a hospital. Bay Area Hospital offers the only comprehensive cancer center with medical oncology and radiation oncology. It's the only place to have a heart attack treated in a cath lab. It's the only place for many specialized, minimally invasive surgical procedures. It's the only place for robotic surgery here on the coast, and one of the largest employers with over 1,100 staff. We can't fail. We have that mission and that commitment. How can folks help today? The facts. Wanted to equip you with a little bit of information and know that we're always open to answer questions from yourselves or community members. Keep healthcare local. I think about when we spend dollars, we support our local business. That's the same thing for healthcare. And we know when you need something and our wait is too long or it's not a service, you have to go elsewhere. We certainly understand that. But when we can keep healthcare dollars in this local healthcare system, we're going to recycle them here into supporting staff, to building and making program expansion possible, and hopefully to improve those access. If you run into a healthcare worker or you know one, I know we're not banging pots and pans anymore, but I tell you what, it's been a long 3 years, and they could certainly appreciate that word of thanks. We are the recipient of letters from patients who take the time to share the care, the compassion, really just the love that they feel at the hands of people at our local hospital, Bay Area Hospital, and it's a delight to share those kind words back with our staff. We've got a significant economic impact, estimated at about $356 million here in the region as we look at the multiplier of our spend both in salaries and other purchase services, and we want to continue to make that strong contribution to the economy. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your support of local healthcare and of Bay Area Hospital.
Any questions? Sarah?
Yeah, I'm curious, you were talking about recruiting and retaining staff. I'm curious how big a barrier housing is in doing that.
When I moved here in 2019, little did I know how much I was going to spend on housing at that point. When we went after a focus at that time to fill 30 nurses, my executive team responded with, but could we find houses if we recruited that many nurses? I will tell you that in the last, year, 18 months, we have had multiple positions where we've been through the interview process, we've both made a decision to work together, and then that healthcare worker has said, you know what, I'm going to have to back out of my offer acceptance. I can't figure out how to find a place to live in the community. So I commend the work that the city and the communities and the council is doing to help. Our housing needs are everything from that physician to that entry-level position. That's our workforce housing needs. Many times you talk workforce and it's just a narrow kind of lower income, but through the lens of our healthcare system, it's the broad cross-section of housing. And we see need for more variety and availability at really every level. Thank you for that question.
That's a great question. Is that the biggest, the largest crisis that you're facing?
I think America is up on a 10-year mission to rebuild our healthcare workforce. We've got this inflection point where all of this knowledge and experience and baby boomer retirement, what's hitting our local community at the same time that it's hitting the nation. At the same time, we just had a burnout accelerant on a lot of healthcare workers who are maybe moving out of the acute environment. Maybe they're looking for an outpatient clinic where it's Monday through Friday, no call responsibilities. Patients walk in and they walk out, just a little easier to handle. And so, our partnership with Squawk and the expansion of the nursing program, I think that was a really important investment. I think there's opportunities we can get a little more strategic horsepower. How do we partner with our high school? How do we introduce them not just to the roles of doctors and nurses, but radiation physicists and, just the vast variety of jobs, interesting careers, well-paying careers that are available when we think about healthcare. So housing, but the workforce, the trained workforce, for many of the positions that we need to fill, it's a multi-year journey to be qualified. And so we've got to start that journey and really invest for the future on top of, kind of aggressively competing in the market right now to fill our current vacancies.
Lucinda?
Yeah, I think that leads into my question. So the mass exodus that you spoke to in, I think, Q4 of 2021, was that due to just fatigue? What was the reason for the departure?
Hard to pin it down exactly, but I think there were kind of multiple drivers. So we had many folks who were on their planned retirement who hit pause, said, I can't leave my community stranded right now. We got the vaccine, we got through that first round of Delta surge, and they kind of felt like, okay, it's safe. I can step back, I can leave my community in better hands now. We've weathered the worst of the storm. At the hospital, we also made a significant investment to update some of our aging technology, our electronic health record. And so that was something we went live in June of 2021, and there was a big project. So that was another, okay, we got through that project. And then there was absolutely, I think, the burnout factor. I think internally we also had some challenges. The corporate fluff activity of we're going to have picnics. You go a year and a half, we've been masked, we've been siloed, we've been pushed out. I think it was very difficult to maintain that sense of connection. It broke down communication. And I think as hard as we tried, staff felt isolated. And so I think that was a contributing factor, was just some of those massive changes in how we worked and how we connected.
Brian, I'm going to preface this next comment or question I have for you is you and I have had this conversation. My late husband passed, and we use the services of Bay Area Hospital, and I couldn't be more thankful and appreciative of those services, the cancer center, the hospital itself. But I'm a pretty outspoken advocate, and I was when he was sick. So there is a reputation in this community that I can get better care up at OHSU, and I can't get the very best care here in town. My husband had that very best care, but how do you overcome that question? Because that's what I hear more in this community than anything is, I'm not getting the level of care here, I'm gonna go to OHSU because I feel safer.
So I've been in other smaller communities before, and there's always the sense of, well, I need to drive to the big city in order to get care. Sometimes that's true, and there are, capabilities that we don't have, and we make referrals. There's a lot where that's just based on myth. And I think we need to do a better job of getting the facts in front of folks, sharing our quality data, and doing a better job of sharing some of those great patient stories that in a community like this carry as much weight, if not more weight. But where an organization has kind of developed that reputation, it takes a real initiative and sustained messaging and the experience that backs up that message for that reputation, if you will, to kind of let it be water under the bridge. So that's the vision. That's what we're striving towards. That's what we want to move. We want to earn that confidence and have folks have the confidence, because Bay Area Hospital is an amazing place. We have talented individuals here. And I can tell you, I would trust my care to many of these professionals who are doing it every day. And we equip them with some state-of-the-art technology. You can go up to the bigger city. They're going to be treating you on the same linear accelerator for cancer that we have available here. It's not second-class technology. And I think that's a real asset that folks need to realize.
Don't you also have a relationship with the doctors at OHSU? So at the Cancer Center, at least I know specifically, there is a relationship where we see OHSU doctors in our local hospital. Is that correct?
We have had some time period where through that relationship they help provide coverage. They definitely help us maintain the quality of our program. We were actually the first Knight Cancer Center affiliate of that program with OHSU. We also have a relationship with the cardiology department, and they oversee our cardiology from a quality perspective, and they just provide that deeper resource. And frankly, that's a professional benefit and helps us attract and retain quality physicians when they can be in a community like this and routinely rub shoulders with those physicians in academic medicine who are training the next generation of physicians. I think it's a real strength of our relationship and the mission of OHSU bearing out in our community.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Question I always check on, how's the mental health department doing?
Mental health department, they are doing well. We just met with them last week. They were worried because after last May's announcement, they said, well, May is next month, and you said we got 12 months of funding. And reminded them that our commitment was to take that 12 months and do as much as we could to really get that program solidified. So we've had a group who specializes in running inpatient units with recently do an on-site assessment. We're expecting their report out due here in the next couple of weeks and exploring the opportunity to look at tapping into their management knowledge and expertise to help us strengthen our psychiatric care. And we're meeting later this month to continue our ongoing partnership in the community, both with some of our outpatient partners. We've been advocating for some legislative changes at the state. Just learned that some of our draft legislation looks like it died in committee. Sometimes it takes the long view. You start a conversation in the first cycle and you get to continue it in a future session. So
I've seen a couple of them. I was wondering if you saw anything coming down the pipe. I saw one that was going to enable hospitals to hold on to people a little longer to stabilize so that they can render better consent towards their care. But yeah, a lot of those things die from various lobbyists
yeah, thank you for the question.
or governors groups.
Well, Brian, it's ironic that you mentioned about the financial difficulties hospitals are having. I don't know if anyone gets the chance to read the Oregonian today. They go into detail about how every hospital in this state is having financial problems. So unfortunately, that's a problem that we all have to deal with. But this facility is necessary for us, for the citizens, to grow our population and also for our visitors. And so it's an asset, and I'm glad that you're at the helm and take care of it. And I'm glad you came, and I'm hoping you come back and visit again.
Thank you. I look forward to that.
All right, thank you. All right, next item is action items, approval of the National Library Week proclamation. Sammy, I understand that you're handling that, right? You should, right?
I'll have to go down here for short people. Okay. Thank you. First, I want to introduce, we have a couple board members here. Ida Jo Gates and Bob Moore here. We have some former library board members. Jennifer's here. Drew has served. And sadly, Rob is now going to be former soon. So I had to introduce them before I started. So National Library Week was first celebrated in 1958. It gives us the opportunity to acknowledge the critical role libraries play in the community. Libraries are welcoming places that bring the community together for entertainment, education, and connections. Today's libraries offer so much more than just books, including technology, support for job seekers, classes, and in our case, even a library of things. So I can read the proclamation now. It says, whereas libraries provide the opportunity for everyone to pursue their passions and engage in lifelong learning, allowing them to live their best life. Whereas libraries have long served as trusted institutions for all members of the community, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or socioeconomic status. Whereas libraries strive to develop and maintain programs and collections that are as diverse as the populations they serve and ensure equity of access for all. Whereas libraries adapt to the ever-changing needs of their communities, continually expanding their collections, services, and partnerships. Whereas libraries play a critical role in the economic vitality of communities by providing internet and technology, literacy skills, and support for job seekers, small businesses, and entrepreneurs. Whereas libraries are accessible and inclusive places that promote a sense of local connection, advancing understanding, civic engagement, and shared community goals. Whereas libraries are cornerstones of democracy, promoting the free exchange of information and ideas for all. Whereas libraries, librarians, and library workers are joining library supporters and advocates across the nation to celebrate National Library Week.
Now therefore, be it resolved that I, Joe Benetti, Mayor of the City of Coos Bay, do hereby proclaim the week of April 23rd through the 29th of 2023 to be National Library Week. During this week, I encourage all residents to visit their library to explore the wealth of resources available. So, council, with that, I need a motion to approve in a second.
I make a motion to approve the proclamation designating April 23rd through 29th, 2023 as National Library Week.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the proclamation for National Library Week. Any other comments? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Thanks
you.
for all you do at the library.
Thank you.
Where's the spelling bee? Did it already happen? Or
It happened this past Saturday, and the pollination team is back with a vengeance, and they won again. They're our longtime winners. This year, though, they had a bit of competition. It got a little heated.
All right.
So, yeah.
Well, good. So it's going to continue on.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Next item on the agenda is approval of the Arbor Day proclamation. Craig, you're handling that?
Yes, sir.
How are you this evening?
Doing well, Mr. Mayor. How about yourself?
Good, thank you.
Counselors, how are you?
This is way more fun than roads, right?
I know. This one grows. The roads don't. So in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for planting of trees. And this holiday, called Arbor Day, was the first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. Trees can reduce the erosion of precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. Trees are a renewable source, providing paper, wood for construction, fuel for fires, countless other wood products. City trees increase the property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify the community. Trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. So this proclamation, whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and the city of Coos Bay was designated as a tree city in 1994. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion and of our precious topsoil, wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas the trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas Coos Bay has been recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and desires to continue its tree planting endeavors. And whereas trees are a source of joy and spiritual renewal.
And now, therefore, I, Joe Panetti, the mayor of Coos Bay, do hereby proclaim the last Friday in April from this time forward shall be observed as Arbor Day in the city of Coos Bay, and I urge all citizens to support efforts to care for our trees and woodlands and to support our city's community forestry program. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the hearts and promote the well-being of present and future generations. So with that being read, I do have a motion and a second.
I'll move to approve the proclamation for April 28, 2023 as the City of Coos Bay Arbor Day.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the Arbor Day proclamation. Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes. So did we plant trees like we, John Toppet's Park?
We will be planting trees at the East Side Boat Ramp and also John Toppet's Park as well.
Great. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is we're going to have a public hearing regarding adoption of a housing production strategy. Carolyn, you're going to give us some update, background?
Good evening, everyone. This evening, the council is presented with the draft housing production strategy that your planning commission has been working on along with staff and consultants over the last year or so. An overview of the draft housing production strategy will be provided by Tim Wood from FCS with the PowerPoint presentation that you received in your packet and that he will present here in a moment. You have been working for compliance with state requirements. There's a lot of basic housing production strategy background in the staff report and a record of your public hearings before the Planning Commission and Council. You have a couple of options after you have your discussion and Tim's presentation. One is to accept the housing production strategy for purposes of compliance with the DLCD grant, which funded much of it. You can have adoption of a resolution at a later date if you like. The other option you have is to adopt the attached resolution accepting the 2023 housing production strategy for your future use. Either one of those options is fine. The HPS work, whether you adopt it by resolution or not, will stand. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tim, and he has a PowerPoint presentation to share with you tonight.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thank you, councilors and Mr. Mayor, and to all of the audience members tonight for being here and for taking the time to hear out our progress on the housing production strategy. So let me go ahead and share my screen and let me know if you can see the PowerPoint here. Okay, great. So council members might recognize this presentation. We met, I think, back in late February and reviewed these strategies. So I'll keep my descriptions pretty brief, but for the benefit of the audience, I'll make sure that there's no details that are glossed over here. So what we'll be looking at tonight includes an overview of the required housing studies that cities have to do in order to remain in compliance with the LCD, housing conditions findings, recent accomplishments that the city has made the HPS strategies that are included in the document, and then whatever discussion will follow. So the mandated housing studies that are required include the housing needs analysis, which you adopted back in 2020, which basically is a forward-looking document ensuring that we're planning ahead for population growth that we see over the next typically 20-year time frame. Housing production strategies are relatively new to the state of Oregon. Typically, they're done after a housing needs analysis is completed, to look more specifically at the strategies that the HNA recommends, and gives a better sense for what those strategies are, what they would look like to implement, kind of timeline and process that would go on in order to see them through to adoption. So it's basically just you could think of it as almost a capital improvement plan for housing strategies, but there's no capital involved. It's just strategies. So just a good planning document to have, and helps the housing environment move forward. The housing findings from the most recent adopted HNA includes that Coos Bay will add about 1,244 new people by 2040. That's net new, so the population will increase by 1,244. Renters are experiencing a supply shortage, with 26.5% experiencing severe rent burden, which is where 50% or more of income is spent on rent. Home ownership demand is very high among upper income households in Coos Bay and prospective households in Coos Bay. And 79.2 acres are needed to address the identified housing need in that HNA. So you have a pretty significant demand to accommodate that 1,244 people. That demand looks a lot like this. So you're going to have 168 single-family detached dwellings that are needed, 369 manufactured housing units, and then 67 duplex, triplex, quadplexes. So attached housing units, basically. That could also be townhomes and that kind of thing as well. Middle housing is what we typically call it now. There have been a lot of recent policy wins in Coos Bay with respect to housing, including streamlining the ADU and duplex regulations in the city, partnerships with private and nonprofit developers, and we'll get into that a little bit later on, engaging with the Community Housing Action Team, or CHAT, on housing trust fund developments, exploration of new urban renewal area focused housing developments, limits on short-term vacation rentals, authorization and standards for cottage clusters, allowances for tri and quadplexes in single-family zones, multi-unit residential development standards for citywide use, minimum density standards in all residential zones, reduction of minimum lot sizes, allowance of single-room occupancies, streamlined land use permit processing requirements, density bonuses for development of deed-restricted affordable housing, and exploration of tax exemption programs for multi-unit affordable housing. So this is all pretty recent, and it's a huge credit to council and staff that these things have all been either explored or implemented, and shows that Coos Bay is taking the issue of housing very seriously. And this document will look to move a few more policy recommendations forward. So here are the highlighted strategies that are included in the housing production strategy. And as you can see here, if you're holding on to the report, these are discussed in pages 21 through 28 of the housing production strategy report. So number one is to continue to develop partnerships with nonprofits for housing development. I won't go over in detail all of the good examples that the city has right now for existing partnerships with nonprofits and developers, but suffice it to say the city's done a really good job of developing those partnerships, and this strategy just calls on the city to continue moving those strategies, those partnerships forward. So pretty straightforward strategy here. Encouraging medium and high density development on medium and high density zones. So this is just finding ways to incentivize developers to use that medium and high density land for its purpose, which is medium and high density development, because at times that land can be developed as single family detached dwellings, which of course sort of defeats the purpose of having the zone, and also results in just less dense development, and so doesn't result in quite as many units, which, as we've established, the city needs over the next 20 years. Providing pre-approved middle housing designs. So there's some good examples of this throughout the Northwest, in particular in Spokane, I believe. And Carolyn's highlighted a couple of examples down in California as well, such as Fort Bragg. The idea here is to provide developers with housing designs that won't clash with design standards, so that the design approval and land use approval process is more simple. And incidentally, as we discussed this strategy with our partners at DLCD, they said that in future iterations of state legislation, there would probably be some sort of statewide templates to be used for this. So this might not even cost the city any money if you wait on it a couple of years. You might be able to piggyback on what the state provides and just make sure that it meets the needs of Coos Bay, but it's a starting point which will be really useful. Development of criteria and process for identifying land to upzone. So this just calls for the city to start the process of looking at potential opportunities to zone some land that's, in particular medium density zone for higher density uses, so apartments and that kind of thing. And this would require an expansion of the development code. So it would be a pretty heavy lift, but we're calling for this to take a longer time frame. So we're not talking about doing this in 1 year or identifying this stuff in 1 year. We're talking about a pretty broad time horizon, but just kind of starting that process, convening the right people, ensuring that staff is all on board. And a good example of this is we're sort of looking at this medium density residential land, and you can see that it's spread, pretty broadly throughout the city. So there's a lot of opportunity to look at that, and especially looking at sort of places that make the most sense in terms of, we want high density development to be around services, grocery stores, medical offices, that kind of thing. So the broad point here is that there's just a lot of opportunity that the city can take advantage of in looking at potentially developing a high density residential zone. Ensuring that zoning is clear and objective, and this is a requirement for statewide land use planning in general, so this is a pretty easy box to check, but essentially this just calls for periodic review of city zoning and design standards to make sure that there is as little leeway as possible, so that when a land use application is brought to the city, there's not a lot of judgment calls being made. Rather, it's pretty straightforward, clear, and objective. Development criteria to allow single unit and duplexes on small commercial lots. And we have an example here in the next couple of slides. But the idea here is basically to identify commercial lots that are probably too small to host commercial development on them, but which are in that commercial zone, and so have that kind of same co-location around services and commercial uses that would be useful, and looking at that to allow some residential development. And again, we're looking broadly at the commercial zone here, which you can see is, again, spread throughout the city. So there's plenty of opportunity to look at. And some good examples are here in this square between Newmark, Michigan, Marple, and Wall. These parcels here, they're small, and so they're unlikely to be developed as full-fledged commercial uses. So these are good examples of potential opportunities for the city to take advantage of that land, that developable land, and try to bring some residential online in those areas. And again, when you've got that residential development, then those people become customers for the businesses nearby, and so everybody's kind of winning there. Another thing that was recommended to us, I think by the Planning Commission, was to take a look at right-of-way that the city might not ever use, and consider to vacate that and let that be a residential use as well. So what we're calling for in this strategy is looking at just kind of examining these options and seeing whether or not they make sense, not by any means suggesting that the city do this full-fledged and do it within 6 months. This is just starting a process and a conversation. Amendments to minimum lot size and building setback requirements. So here we're looking at just kind of efficiency measures for housing development, and a good example is over here on the right. When you allow that sort of zero lot line development style, you do wind up saving quite a bit on utility, infrastructure costs, stemming water and sewer to a property. When they're co-located like that, they're much easier to pipe to. Presently, I think the city does allow some zero lot line development, but there's a conditional use in there, so the process is a little more onerous. So what we're calling for here is just examining the possibility of letting that be allowed by right in certain situations. Finally, examination of property tax abatement. And so we saw earlier in the set of slides that the city's examined the possibility of allowing for property tax exemptions on targeted housing types. So what we're calling for here is just kind of continuing that conversation, seeing if we can implement it in Coos Bay. Incentives can be targeted based on what the city's looking for. For instance, multifamily, nonprofit, income restricted, or area specific. So it doesn't have to be broadly throughout a particular zone. It could just be, on a particular project that checks all the boxes that the city needs to see. And the idea here is to just allow there to be a little bit more leeway for developers to make a project that might not pencil otherwise pencil. So just kind of working that margin there. So that's it for the strategies that we've recommended in the housing production strategy. I'm happy to answer any questions or just allow council to chat about what we've talked about.
All right, before I open up to public comments or have it for a public hearing, any questions from the council?
I just, Tim, this is a shameless plug for the staff and the council. If I remember correctly at the work session, I remember you saying something to the effect of the city of Coos Bay and the work that's been done. You've worked for a number of different cities, and I see you shaking your head. Would you like to finish that? Because I want you to tell everyone in this room and everyone watching online just how progressive we are as a city.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So that set of slides that shows the bulleted list of recent accomplishments in the city is something that I tend to try to do in a lot of my projects, because I think it's important for cities to recognize how far they've come and how seriously they've taken the issue of housing. And that's the longest list that I've seen. That's a very long list of pretty impressive accomplishments, because very few of those are easy to accomplish, and many of them are actually quite difficult. So it's a testament to staff, it's a testament to council and planning commission that these things have been brought up. And in a lot of ways, obviously housing is the hottest topic in the state right now, but it's impressive and a testament to Coos Bay to see that list has already been accomplished and compiled in a place, kind of quite a ways ahead of the curve, really. So it's a real testament to staff. It's a real testament to everyone involved. So kudos to Coos Bay.
Thank you, Tim.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, at this time, so I'm going to open the public hearing regarding adoption of the housing production strategy. You've heard some comments about it and some discussion that has been given by staff and our consultant. Any comments? Would be the time to come up and make one. No one? Everyone's silent.
Jim?
Jim's
Hey, good to sit.
Okay, good evening. Like I said in comments about a month ago, you did an awful lot. But I kind of want to reinforce something. Pretty big project, pretty well done. Joe had some people look at the report prior and do a bunch of corrections. We didn't find too much to correct on this. We have in the county, the school districts, both of them, SWAC, the two tribes, which are big business, okay. So the county, the two tribes, Marshfield, North Bend, SWAC, 200 job vacancies. Some of those jobs are 6 figures. The hospital's in there, by the way. That's the one I missed. We have 187 available housing units in the North Bend and Coos Bay zip code, and just 200 job vacancies in just those organizations. That doesn't even count the private sector.
It's actually, I just got the number, it's over 700 open vacancies in the county.
Okay, so everyone talks about the port's going to expand. Everybody talks about we have to drive tourism. We have to drive housing. We have our own economic engine. We can't house our own workforce. It's pretty clear. And anything that takes the eye off the ball of trying to house a workforce, and where I live, the nurse's aide lives 250 feet away from me. The oncology doctor lives 2 doors down. All right, it's a very homogenized workforce. Maybe is a good term to use. I'm not sure that's the right term, but I just need to tell you guys, this is the important thing. You get this one knocked out, the rest of that stuff, it'll come along because you'll have the people driving the economy. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? So I'll close the public hearing, and just to follow up with what Jim said, is actually correct. And you know how hard we've been working on this, and I think this plan shows where we've been and what we want to do and what we need to do to accomplish it. It's a tough situation, and now we're looking at interest rates on top of it, making it even more difficult. So it's a battle that we've been dealing with for a long time. We have a development of 450 homes that as you know, that's kind of been slowed down. I think it's picked up. They're moving forward on it, not as fast as we'd like, but hopefully they'll get going on it. I know North Bend has some issues going on, or some development happening. Looks like that's moving forward. We have a couple low-income housings, as you know, and we have some other development happening. So it's not enough, and it takes time to get these things built. I wish it could be done tomorrow. But I remember in 2016, I was talking to one of the, I think A.L. Edwards or one of those. They said they could rent 500 homes tomorrow if they had them. And that hasn't changed. So I think we understand where we're at, and hopefully we can get this resolved, and these things will help us do more developments. Anyone else? All right, so now we need to decide if we want to adopt this resolution this evening, as Carolyn mentioned, or we want to, with adoption, to consider it at a later date. How do you want to proceed? Roger?
Close the public hearing.
Oh, I thought I did. I closed the public hearing. See, Rob, you're going to leave, and now what, right? Roger, you had a comment?
No, that was it.
All right. I had a couple people looking at it. How about you, Nicole? All right. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. So how would you like to proceed?
I'll say there are things in here I like. I lean towards accept, not adopt, and I'll explain that. But running through, I liked the idea they brought up of helping acquire foreclosures, providing property to developers. I think was the most effective strategy we've had so far. So if we can procure property as it goes into foreclosure and avoid land speculators from out east buying up property they're going to forget they own, that's a good idea to me. I got a little lost on slide 7 where they talk about 0 lot lines. When I was looking at it, it looks like a duplex somebody drew a line down the middle of, so I don't understand that one, but that's me. Couple things. I suppose my concern with it is that it notes early on that it's based on the 2020 housing needs analysis, that we knew we needed to do a new one, and we got the 2022 that had flaws itself, so we didn't adopt that, we accepted it. This product being based on the 2020 that we knew was flawed and went out to fix gives me a problem to adopt it, because we already know it's based on material, by no fault of the people that wrote the plan, but we know it's based on material that over-assumed that that 400-unit development would be done, and it's changed hands multiple times, and it's moving again, but it makes me nervous. There wasn't any consideration in that 2020 plan or analysis of the impact of short-term vacation rentals. We've only got 39 right now, but that's 39 units that are missing, that aren't factored into the outcome of the housing needs analysis here. And I had the same complaint over their methodology for assuming how much land we need as the scale of development, and the method they use, it doesn't take into account anything local to Coos Bay. It compares it to like-sized cities in the state, and there are no coastal like-sized cities in Oregon to Coos Bay, so the factors of development are entirely different. One of the pieces I wanted to circle back on, though, because I always take this pot shot, was, isn't that optimistic of me? There is a spot for things for us to advocate for, and I would like to see us add into that block that I can't find right now again, even if we do just accept it, that we continue to advocate that the state, the governor's office, provide Coos Bay with the same benefit it is providing other areas that were included in the homelessness emergency declaration. Not necessarily the money, but at least that we be provided an equal opportunity to have surplus state lands. Again, giving out land or putting out a request for proposal for someone to build housing in a timeline we dictate to our standards was the most effective thing I think we've done. And it still doesn't make sense to me how far out of their way that declaration went to include an area like Metro, while it left out the entire rest of the rural Oregon continuum of care. It left out 28 counties. That makes no sense to me, and because I always take this shot, I know where there's 119 acres of residential land right now sitting in Eastside, and it is governed by a board that is appointed by the governor. So I see no reason that land couldn't be cut into a little to address our housing needs. Not to say it's the port, but it's the port. Anyway.
All right. Drew, you gave us a lot.
I actually have a comment in regards to Drew. I thought that, yes, we looked at the 2020 study, but if I remember correctly, I thought, Tim, you took into consideration the newest report in this analysis. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
Well, we looked at both. I mean, certainly we're drawing from both. So, yeah, but I think we emphasize 2020 since that was, right, I think, adopted, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Carolyn, you can probably fill them in a little bit.
Yes, you're right.
So the bottom line is that both played a factor, and so we consider both.
Okay. And Drew,
I might have misunderstood then.
No, and I'm in complete support of adding that to advocacy, so I support you 100%. That's all I have.
Okay, and the 2020 housing needs analysis was with the manufactured homes at that time. And the reason we looked at the 2022 that came back so quickly, because that's a lot quicker than normal, is because it went from manufactured homes to stick-built homes. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right. So, and we didn't adopt that, but we acknowledged it, and to get the DLCD grant taken care of. There was a lot of questions about that report that I think need to be cleared up and can be, but that it shouldn't stop what we do here, because I think it can still be taken into consideration, if I understand correctly. So, Roger?
I would agree, and regardless of which report it was based on, or even some new criteria or a new landscape that may appear, what you really have is some strategies aimed at increasing housing production, and that's probably the focus that we should be looking at.
Yeah, and I think the key comment that Roger made is these are strategies. And so this is not something that cannot be changed or modified. You know, with the housing needs analysis, it would be a little bit more difficult to do. I think that's what, at least what I was careful to adopt it at that time, just to acknowledge it. So, but anyway.
That was going to be my question, because, you know, implementation of this, I mean, I was just telling Councilor Stevens that, you know, some of the streamlining that we've talked about for over a year, and here we are, you know, still working on these strategies. So if we have this strategy approved, how can we, with 700 jobs to fill, and what we've heard from the hospital, it's critical that we move. You know, we can't just kick this can down the road for a year. We've got a problem. And so does this pave the way for us to be able to do that, to start some processes, to streamline the process itself to get housing in production?
Well, I think that we are moving forward, but this would help facilitate that further, I would say. For instance, the tax abatement that we can address and we talked about, this would get this moving. Also, zero lot lines is another thing that we've considered, and the state is allowing us to do that. So on some lots that can be built, without the zero lot lines, it's more difficult to put those duplexes and multifamily dwellings on. We have one that wants to do, I forget however many, and how many, 72 units? Was it?
I think it's between 60 and 70 units.
Where there's multiple lots that they want to combine. There's some other factors that go into that, like, you know, he wants to get the road taken care of, which is, you know, anyway, that's just another problem. But the zero lot lines are one of the issues that could help facilitate that, or these, you know, strategies, I should say.
And I can see that. I like a lot of the strategies in here. And I'm not sure why we couldn't just provide those as direction to staff and monitor progress. My only concern with adopting it is the documents that are the source. So, because most of what's in here we've already given direction on. We have to keep probably better track of it, and that's on us. But most of what's in there is stuff we've already pushed towards.
I thought this was a requirement that we had to do this, correct? So if we,
I think this is like the other one. As long as we accept it, we're okay.
okay.
You can adopt the, with consideration at a later date, or we can attach this resolution and accept it. And you just, so it's, Caroline, you want to weigh in here, or Roger?
I think Roger was going to say something.
Sure, I can share a little bit. One thing that there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion is the implementation section of this document. And it talks about when you can do these things. You can certainly speed it up, whether you adopt it by resolution or you just accept it. I think adopting it by resolution, though, memorializes your commitment in a more formal way. And I believe that's valuable for you down the road in your work with DLCD and your other communities. But either way will go, either way will work. So it's certainly up to you.
You were going to make a comment, Roger?
I don't see a downside for adopting it. In fact, I see an upside. We'll be working with the overlapping taxing districts as we move forward to gain support for the monkey tax abatement, and being able to report that this is part of an adopted strategy that's been vetted through DLCD, I think is important.
And I think the critical thing, Drew, and the rest of the council, is that we can change this and modify it.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. The housing needs analysis was a little bit more difficult to try to do.
Yeah.
This gives us, and I said, sets a tone, I would say, for us. So
I'd agree. It won't kill me.
With that said, I'll make a motion to
Okay.
adopt the attached, sorry, my computer just went black. The adopt resolution accepting the 2023 HPS for future use.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the attached resolution accepting the 2023 housing, what's it called? Production strategy for future use. Any other comments?
So we're accepting it, not adopting it? Is that what you wanted to say?
No,
Adopt
I
the
said
attached,
adopting it.
adopt the
Adopting.
attached resolution.
Okay.
So I'll restate it. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the attached resolution accepting the 2023 housing production strategy for future use. All right, any other comments, discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes. Thanks, good discussion. Next item is consideration to approve a 5-year strategy plan for coordinating homeless pilot project. Nicole?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to open this up and then leave the floor to Jennifer from RDI to follow up. So in the spring of 2022, the cities of Coos Bay and North Bend, along with the county, worked together to secure funding through House Bill 4123. We were awarded $1 million in state funding, which was to be shared over a 2-year period, with the goal to operationalize a coordinated office to strengthen the community's homeless response. With 8 groups throughout the state awarded this funding, it's part of what the state has called the Coordinated Homeless Pilot Project. Each of our 3 entities appointed 2 representatives to sit on an advisory board. The advisory board then had selected a consultant, rural development initiatives, to assist in the strategic plan development. That's a requirement of the House Bill 4123. Over the last several months, in a very rapid process but thorough, RDI has held a couple of town hall meetings and had numerous one-on-one stakeholder conversations. Also worked with Zen City to develop a community survey, and all in an effort to kind of pull together the strategic plan that's being presented to you. The House Bill 4123 requirements suggest that the council should review and approve this strategic plan for next steps. So I'd open that up to Jennifer.
Thanks, Nicole. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain what we've been working on. I thank Nicole for her terrific introduction and want to ask if the preference here is for me to, she's already sort of set the stage with respect to how we pulled together this document. I thought I could just run through and explain, I'm not going to read it, just explain how it's set up and organized and give you an opportunity to ask questions, and will that work?
That'll work.
Okay, so the first 2 pages of the document are essentially what Nicole just explained, which is sort of an introduction of why we're doing this, and provides an executive summary. Additionally, it outlines the 8 priorities that were gleaned as a result of this process. We talked to about 60 or so stakeholders. Stakeholders included people with experience in homelessness, people who provide services to the unhoused, and people who are also working on housing production, like you just discussed. The page 3 of the document basically summarizes what we heard from people who are providing services to the unhoused, who are trying to find housing for the community and for people who need it in the community, and for those who have lived experience. We thought we should pull these out just because these are things that we kept hearing over and over and over again in our interviews. So just to run through those really quick, the most frequently identified priority was a demand for additional beds across the housing spectrum, no matter what type of housing. We also want to make sure that we communicate that the services to the unhoused population are somewhat coordinated. They're not perfect, but people are working really hard in the trenches, so to speak, and we wanted to make sure that that came out as part of this report. While this funding that we're talking about will help improve that, there is already some coordination happening. We're also hearing very loud and clear that there's a disconnect between those providing services to the unhoused and the broader community, and you can see that when we talk about the results of the community survey. The community somehow needs to get more engaged and have a greater understanding of what's already happening and how they can get involved to help. And then the other thing that came up was that, and I think we all know this in the room already, which is that a lot of entities outside of traditional social service agencies are getting involved in solving this problem, like the Parks Department, the Public Works Department, police and fire, libraries, schools, etc. One of the things that I also think that as a region that I'm going to say we a lot, and I'm sorry, it's just a slip up. So I know I'm not we anymore, but that local leaders, the local elected officials and service providers have been communicating to state and federal agencies and elected officials what their needs are, and there is definitely a priority and an interest in making sure that continues to happen, particularly as we talk about some of the recent legislation that's been passed at the state and federal level that will provide resources and funding for some of the problems that you're seeing on the ground. An interesting observation by many of the stakeholders we talked to is it seems like there's an effort to develop housing and then there's an effort to address homelessness, and that those don't often get connected with one another. So I thought that was something interesting to mention. And then the other thing that I think I learned a lot through this process, our team learned a lot through this process, but one of the things that we thought was interesting that we didn't know going into this is that there are segments of the unhoused population that need specific services directed towards that type of person or group that's unhoused, as opposed to a one-size-fits-all strategy. So things like families with children need services that senior citizens and disabled people on fixed income need different types of services, and youth exiting the foster care system need a different suite of services, et cetera, et cetera. Also, as I think probably you know, we found that services to the unhoused are mostly concentrated in the Coos Bay, North Bend area. So on page 5, you can see the results of the community survey. I will say we left it, Zen City, who is a contractor that helped us set up this survey, as Nicole mentioned. We're leaving the survey open so people can continue to participate as they wish, and you can continue to collect data. But at last check, we had over 200 responses. And some of them, and these were all open-ended questions, so Zen City did an analysis of this. We also did some poll quotes just so you could see exactly what some people were saying, but nothing too surprising here, honestly. What does homeless look like in your community? Living on the streets, camping was the top answer. That's just a visible manifestation of the problem. And then I think the thing that most speaks to the fact that we have a disconnect between those providing services and the broader community is the response to what do you think was working well in addressing the housing shortages and services to the unhoused, and the overwhelming answer was nothing. And so since we know that is not the case, that it seems like there's an opportunity there. And then we also asked about how the region can improve its approach to dealing with homelessness, and so there's a list of things that we probably already talked about and considered, like shelters and law enforcement and designated space and substance abuse treatment. So the other thing that came up, particularly with respect to our conversations with the advisory group in terms of how this thing should be structured, is on page 8. We wanted to make sure that we had a conversation about exactly what is this problem that we're trying to solve. Because if you go into a conversation about this topic and say we're going to solve homelessness, it's too big. You know, we're talking about 14 different issues. We're not just talking about solving homelessness, right? And so this is just a list of some of the issues that came up that might warrant some deeper analysis. I think we could better understand the demographics of the unhoused population. We could look at our data systems and understand better how those data systems are identifying who's unhoused in the community. There was a lot of conversation about the connection between crime and the homeless, and it seems like some data could elucidate that problem, that issue, and explain whether or not there is a link or there isn't a link, or if there is, what it is. A lot of folks talked about Measure 110, the I've been slipping over this all day, all last 24 hours. Drug Decriminalization Act. The conversation is twofold. First of all, they're talking about the fact that there's some impression that this is bringing more people to our region that are interested in the fact that it's not as there are fewer penalties for substance ingestion, if you will. But there's also the people that we talk to that are providing substance abuse services to people in the community, and they are benefiting from the fact that this measure is providing resources and funding for their efforts. So there's a House bill right now, 2513, that's trying to sort of wrestle with all of these issues that have come up as a result of the bill. Also, economic factors, what actually is contributing to this problem, and do we need to spend some time identifying that as opposed to just speculating on what it is and trying to get some advice about how we might maybe create some economic indicators that help us. And then, of course, there's the issue of duplication of services and the education of the broader community. So the meat of, or the main part of this document starts on page 10, and what I will say is that the stakeholders and the broader community have sort of gelled into what these 8 priorities. And what we did for each of these 8 priorities that you see in this report is we, first of all, and I kind of want to build on what you talked about in your last agenda item, which is we want to make sure that there is an awareness of how much has already been accomplished and how much is already being worked on, so that we're not, reinventing the wheel here, and there are things that we can say, well, we've been doing this, what's working and what isn't. And so each one of these priorities includes a discussion of what's already happening. So that can be considered as part of going forward. Also, each goal considers some short-term actions that could happen. Particularly because we're talking about this $1 million that we need to spend and leverage for additional dollars for the more long-term strategies. So we have short-term actions, long-term strategies. We did some research into available resources for each strategy and tied them to the goal, and then also made some suggestions about how we might measure success, because there are some reporting requirements for the grant or for the funding that's being received, but also we're assuming that people will want to know how things are going. So the first and second goals here were actually described in the statute. But they also happen to be the top priorities of the stakeholder group, which is to improve coordination among agencies and jurisdictions, and to develop pathways to supported permanent housing and increased workforce housing, as we discussed earlier. So those first 2 priorities were pretty high on the list and are also part of the statute, so we feel like we're going forward in the right direction and mirroring what the state's interests are as well. The third goal is, again, around increasing community understanding. This really came through loud and clear in the town hall meetings we listened to, in the stakeholder work groups, and in all of in the survey, everything. This is something to certainly focus on to get the community more engaged in this issue. A lot of the folks we talked to really have specific opinions about the root causes of this problem, and it feels like it might be a good idea to do some work around what they actually are, if that makes sense. I think this is going to be a difficult thing to get to, but we wanted to mention it because it came up so frequently as a priority. Number 5 addresses the I would say what we mostly heard about from the broader community, which is the visual manifestation of this problem, which is concerns about what they perceive as public safety and what they perceive in terms of the trash accumulation or the visual look of the increase in the homeless population. So that's what that goal is about. I think there is a lot of consensus around number 6, which is that none of this is going to happen without improving mental health and substance abuse services alongside housing. And then we already talked about number 7, which is advocate for community needs related to housing and homelessness at the state and federal level. We feel like this is already happening, but we wanted to have a heightened awareness of the fact that it needs to continue so that we can have resources available to us. My bad Hamilton joke is this is when we need to be in the room where it happens. And then the last thing, we haven't talked about it a lot, but we wanted to provide some strategies. It is part of the requirements of the grant agreement and the House bill, is that along the way we need to identify and address racial disparities in providing equitable pathways to permanent housing. We did a little bit of engagement around this topic, but we didn't get a lot of traction, and we wanted to make sure we mentioned it as a goal, because the statute will certainly be expecting us to consider and report on that as well. Okay, I'm taking a breath. So page 22, sorry, this is a long document. Thanks for your attention. The statute requires that the strategic plan consider national models. Our organization our expertise is in community engagement, community development. It is not in housing. So we pulled in an expert who we had heard about that had been working with a lot of other communities in the state and asked him to just teach us about models. And so this is the list that we came up with as a result of that. His comment was, you know, these are national models, take it for what it's worth. This is not a plug and play situation, as we all know. He said, but certainly there are things that can be learned from the different models that are available. And so you have these resources at your disposal. On page 24, we have a glossary of terms, only because, boy, there's a lot of acronyms in this particular issue, and we thought you should know what some of them were and also define the terms. Page 28 is just the list of the advisory group members, which Nicole already talked about. Page 29, these are the stakeholder group members that we have been able to connect with. The list is actually, the list we started with is longer than this, and so we're hoping that there can still be a continuous process. And I know I talked to Andrew about looking at who we're still missing and making sure that those folks get added so that their perspectives can be understood and heard. And then the appendices are just, well, there's one thing I really want to mention just because she did such a wonderful thing for this project. We were approached by a woman named Barb Milliron, who has just really developed a strong interest in this particular issue. And she said, I want to help, I'll do it volunteer, just give me something to do. It turns out she has a lot of connections to the churches and faith-based organizations in the county, so we said, go forth and talk to this group and find out what they're saying. So I think that her work definitely benefited from this project, so I wanted to make sure I reported it in the document. She talked to 23 churches in 2 months. So we had some people in this that ended up joining our stakeholder group as a result of her work, and their insights were included as part of the main plan, but I just wanted to give her a little shout out because go Barb. We also have some policy initiatives. I think a lot of those have actually been discussed this evening already. I searched the legislative information system and found over 80 bills relating to housing and houselessness, so they are not all listed here. But just to know that these are some of the particularly interesting bills, like the governor's executive orders and the associated bills that go with that. So just to give us a place to start. Also, technical assistance resources. The one that we're working on right now with the advisory group that we think is probably a high priority is the Department of Housing and Community Services has a form that you can fill out that basically says what help do you need to implement these. And so we're talking about things like grant writing and technical assistance with understanding how to build housing development packages and things like that. So we're trying to get that filled out so that maybe we can get some help and resources. As far as the funding sources are concerned, we contracted with Kelly Nonprofit Consulting to do the grant research for this particular project, and they have identified which sources go with each goal, as I mentioned before. But we also, and I know you can't read this, I know it's super tiny type, but this is the kitchen sink. So this is basically everything, even though they're not associated with a particular goal, just so that you have that list of resources available to you. Okay, that is the report. I appreciate all of the great support we've had from the county and the cities to help put this together, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Council?
So, first off, I appreciate the Hamilton joke. That's how these guys got me to sit up here in the first place. And thank you for your work on this. And I don't know if my question's for you or Nicole or one of the counselors that's on the committee, but this grant requires us to run this program for at least 5 years, but we only have funding for 2 years, and we have a bunch of funding resources in here. So where does the responsibility lie for finding that future funding?
That is an excellent question. I would suggest that might be a topic of our next meeting. Now that we have this plan here before all of the governing bodies, we are the last to chat about it. The other two have already talked about it and approved it. The various pilots are handling that resource question differently. Some of them have actually hired a body to do some grant writing. Some of them are looking towards consultants. So we need to really sit in this with our advisory group and come up with a good plan. We obviously need some expertise in that field. Capacity is going to be a challenge for each of our entities, so reaching out to somebody who has capacity and expertise is going to be crucial for years 3 through 5.
I can tell you from knowing some of the other projects, at least one of them is going to be running through grants that are going to pass through their community action agency. Another one is partnering with their CCO so that it can bill Medicaid to provide some of these homelessness services, since they tend to overlap. If the person's homeless, they probably qualify for OHP, and there's new regulations coming out. So those are two of what I would consider the more stable ways to fund it. Grants are great, but I don't trust them for consistency.
And part of this group is, it's not just the community group that's meeting. There is a meeting each month with the larger 8 projects. So a lot of that information can be gleaned from that as these are developed.
I mean, I guess I just have to say I'm a bit jaded. I think that we have actually worked on quite a few of these short-term strategies as a community in the 10 years that I've lived here, to not a lot of success. And so where's like the accountability for moving this forward?
Well, I think that one benefit of being part of a grant agreement for $1 million is that there's required reporting. And I think that this particular document is due May 23rd. And the next reporting period will be November 15th, I believe. Yeah, November 15th, a report will be required to demonstrate our progress on the grant. So in other words, we outline these goals, and then we have to make progress towards these goals by certain intervals. And we could do that on our own as a community, but I think the fact that someone outside is also holding our feet to the fire a little bit may be helpful. And perhaps this is a little bit Pollyanna-ish. And I can understand the perspective that you're coming from, but I think we have some funding behind it this time that maybe we haven't before as well.
I would just add to that, having co-chaired the homeless work group for the city, just the fact on the faith-based community that got involved as a stakeholder in this, and that level that we went from when we couldn't get any cooperation from that community to what we saw, because that's what I saw at the stakeholder meeting, is wow. I mean, that was an eye-opener for me, that having this strategy, it is not something that you set on a shelf, and there's a person also behind it with boots on the ground in this community that will champion this through. I think there's more to this. As she said, there's someone kind of holding the feet to the fire, because we're spending someone else's money to make this happen. And I think it puts it in a document that's a working document that we can work with.
I just don't want to see a situation where we develop another meeting to talk about the problem and we don't actually create any action.
Well, I respect where you're coming from. Totally. It's already really been said, but I feel like it needs to be said again. We started these conversations in 2016, and I know that councils probably before us were having these conversations as well. I think we've got money this time. And so it was easy to have it wasn't easy when Drew and Stephanie really led this conversation. The goal was to bring all the parties together. And here we are with $1 million, and all the parties are together, and the list is longer. And so I get your point, but I feel like if we are using some of the resources to get more grants, and because I think from the state level and from the federal level, there's so much more focus on this. We're seeing this everywhere. Would I like it to happen quicker? I think we all would. And so I feel, just as a counselor, probably more confident that something is going to happen because we actually have a document that everyone, the county, the city of North Bend, the city of Coos Bay has agreed upon to go forth and do good work.
I think a benefit of this as well, aside from all the monetary aspects, is this comes with a dedicated body to do the job. We've all been trying to do it on the side of whatever else we do. But now we can throw stuff at Andrew if it doesn't work out. Is he still back there?
No, he's at the North Bend Council meeting. Yeah.
But yeah,
doing this.
I'd expect to see positions like this also become mandated before this 5-year period is out. I know Washington County just hired somebody out of the state to be their director of the homeless office, and they did not receive this grant. But if one of the counties was going to know that it was coming, it would probably be Washington County.
Wait a minute, Bob. So I appreciate this. This is a great strategic plan that you put together. So when you say we, is RDI going to be involved in this? Or
No, that's why I said I got to stop saying we. I just couldn't help myself. We are contracted to help this get developed and approved.
Right.
And that's sort of the end of our scope of work. And so after that, I've been talking to Andrew about, the fact that I would be riding off into the sunset, and that I'm available to him if he wants to talk through anything that we did, or if he just needs a sounding board. And I know that he's also been meeting regularly with Bob Moore,
right.
And some other folks in the community that are that can help kind of get him on his feet. But he's been going gangbusters. He's like he said, he had 5 meetings today. He's really doing a great job.
So I mean, this is a great plan, and I understand it. But don't you think that this is going to be very difficult for Andrew or one person to handle? I mean, the layout is great. What you're suggesting is monumental. I mean, it's
I know.
And so, and it needs to be done, and grants to be done. We need financial. The $1 million is great, but it's only going to go so far, and we have a lot to accomplish. So, is there a plan that's not laid out here with the intent that someone else is going to come on or someone's going to help? Because I don't think Andrew can do it. No matter how good it's not just Andrew. Anyone can do it.
Right. No, I think that's part of the conversation we've been having, and we talked a little bit about it before this meeting as well. Is we think the next step is, this is the 10,000-foot view. There's going to need to be a 6-month view and plan, and we think it's going to involve possibly someone with expertise in communications, possibly someone with expertise in grant writing. In other words, we need to think about what are the skill sets you need, and do you want to hire them, or do you just want to contract them out? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so that feels like the direction that the advisory group is going next, to talk about what is the mix of humans that they need to support Andrew with his work.
And some of that's going to come from Andrew as he continues these conversations in the community as well, and has something to work from. But we have to adopt, all 3 of us have to adopt this plan.
I think it's the next great step. I mean, I think it's the way to go, and I'm glad that we did it and where we're at. I think RDI did a wonderful job, and I'm sure you're instrumental in helping with that, Jennifer. But I understand where Sarah's coming from, because, it's like, we have been wrestling with this. We started in 2016, and now here we are, and we got this initiative going. It's just that we need success because the public does not understand what you've said. And how do we engage them? And, yes, we can have town hall meetings, and we can go back when we have the last one. It was packed, and, they just don't understand what we're wrestling with. Legalities, that's not even mentioned in here. We're tied to some legalities that we can't get away from either. So
Right, and I think that when I was talking about communications, I think I was thinking something a little bit different than town halls, but.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
But I mean, however, we need to engage the community.
Right.
Anyway, I appreciate it.
I'm sorry we didn't solve homelessness today, but.
Yeah. So you'll be back here next month to resolve it, right?
I really want to thank Jennifer and RDI, because
absolutely.
I think that just her knowledge from being in this community and the struggles, and being really, as a counselor, you've seen this for years as a struggle that the community has faced. I think that helped. And I too have the Pollyanna view that I feel more momentum now than I did even as a chair of the work group.
Well, I agree.
Because we had this opportunity.
I mean, I want this thing to be successful, and I think this is a step in the right direction. But I think Andrew needs help. Anybody, and I hate to say Andrew all the time, whoever's in this position is going to need help from multiple.
Yeah, it's not a one-person job.
No, it's not. So I hope that we can support him. Bob, sorry.
Yeah, I would just address the issue of the resources a little bit. I actually took the trouble to blow those grant pages up so that I could read them without a magnifying glass and analyze that chart. And Rob, your concern about what's the city's responsibility, I think when you look at that chart, what you see is that the different cities and county and other groups or organizations that are funded by federal dollars and state dollars, there are opportunities there that the city could apply for. They may not have it in their plan to apply for it, but they need to look at those opportunities and see if that's something that they want to retain a grant writer or have a in-house grant writer apply for those kind of grants. But there's a whole lot of other grant opportunities in there too, that some, for example, that are available only to a domestic violence program, or some that are only available to drug and alcohol programs. So all those people are at the table, and they're all going to look at that and say, yeah, we're going to go for those funds. And it's part of Andrew's job to coordinate all of that and see where those sources are coming from. One example, I'm a commissioner with the Coquille Indian Housing Authority. We just got a tribal pot of homeless dollars, $700 and some thousand. We're already looking at how we can plug that into this plan that we're talking about tonight. So there are lots of ways to approach the resource problem. I don't think that the city governments or the county government have to worry that it's a burden that's all on their shoulders. It's more than one way to approach it.
Right, thanks, Bob.
And I am continuing to support Andrew in his work, so he's not doing it all on his own. Call me his mentor.
Okay, great. It's going to take many, I believe, and I hope many step up.
And yeah, there's probably a need for other personnel to be hired, but those are decisions. One of the things that I'm very curious about with this whole program, having managed a homeless services department for 25 years, Andrew doesn't have a job description. And Andrew doesn't have a direct supervisor. He's got a crew of supervisors. And that in itself is a bit of a challenge, in my opinion, and how he is going to be supported in his position and given the right kind of direction, and who's available for him to consult with on a daily basis. So I think that as you that are sitting on the advisory council, that's something that you need to take a closer look at how you want to manage that.
There was a job description written for the hiring. I'm a little confused by that one.
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I think it's important to the people that are listening. I'm glad that you mentioned your knowledge on this topic, because you had a career in dealing with this. So I appreciate that you're assisting Andrew.
I agree. I also am glad he mentioned the generosity of the Coquille Indian tribe, and I imagine that we will probably see that from our other tribal partner, the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. So thank you, Bob. We keep using Andrew's name, but I just want to make sure everyone knows his title is he's the director for the Office of Houselessness Coordination for this committee. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
But he is the one that was, I mean, the burden's going to fall on his shoulders.
I don't disagree.
I think this committee needs to understand that I believe he's going to need some help. And Bob is one of them, and I think there needs to be others. So.
Is that something we can get on the agenda for the next meeting?
Not this agenda.
No,
correct, not the city's agenda. So these, our advisory group's been meeting weekly, walking into this strategic plan being presented. I think our intention is to continue to do so as we see some of these next steps unfold. Andrew and I have been also meeting weekly to establish that agenda and also some tasks that we might look at each week, just really focusing on 7 days at a time, because this is a huge undertaking on his part and in this advisory group's role.
You might be the supervisor.
We're still figuring out those hats. I think one thing we'll talk about this next week is kind of the bylaws and how we operate as an advisory board. It's a big task, and it's a big elephant taken one bite at a time.
Well, I want to thank the advisory committee that's involved in this and everyone that's made this come about. And this strategy plan is the next step that I think we need to take. Thank RDI and Jennifer and Bob and everyone else involved. Look for success, and I know there'll be success. It's just how much can we accomplish? It's a big task. So anyway, I think we needed to approve this, and so do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the 5-year strategic plan for the coordinated homeless pilot project.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the 5-year strategic plan for the coordinated homeless pilot project. Any other discussion or comment on this? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, next item, consideration of appointment to the Coos Bay North Bend Water Board Budget Committee. Roger.
I obviously have a much
Thanks,
easier
Jennifer. Good to see you.
For you. Each year, the Water Board extends an invitation to both the cities of Coos Bay and North Bend to consider appointing either their mayor or a council member to participate in the Water Board annual budget meetings. I will share it's not limited to elected officials. Should you wish, you could appoint one of your appointed officials. In the past, I have served in that, and this year, Assistant City Manager Rutherford has also said she would be available. There are 2 meetings that are planned beginning in June. The first one is June 1st, and the second is June 15th. They run about an hour, hour and a half during the noon hour or so, and lunch is provided. So, with that, is there anybody interested in serving on that group? And if not,
So does any counselor have a burning desire to be on the budget committee for the water board? In the past, as Roger mentioned, no one has shown an interest on the council, and so he has stepped up and done that. But if anyone would like to, that'd be great. If not, I think Nicole would be willing to fill in as she is
Well, I have a huge desire, but I will no longer be a counselor on June 1st, so I'm out.
Can we appoint someone besides a counselor? Rob? There's always ways to do this stuff. All right.
I just had a question. Is that something that Carmen will be at because he's a board member?
Yes, Carmen will be there. Yep.
Great.
And that's, you know, what I think is important. I'm going to reiterate this. I think it's important that we have a counselor sit on that board. I think that way we get feedback and we understand what's going on a regular basis. And thanks, Carmen. Anyway, should we suggest let Nicole take and volunteer to do this for us?
If she's willing to do that, I'm fine with that.
Do we need
I
a
think we
motion or
have
just
elected
consensus?
representation.
Does everyone give consensus? Good job. And since she was a finance director, I know you'll do a great job. She holds our feet to the fire. Okay. All right, next item, discussion regarding upcoming council vacancy. Roger.
yes, sadly, this is a topic we've covered numerous times over the years. But Council President Miles has indicated that he will be leaving the area and will be forced to vacate his position on the council. That opens up an opportunity to fill that position. The process used is really embedded into the city charter, and it provides you a great amount of latitude on how to fill the position. The reality is whoever fills the position needs to be a qualified applicant, someone that is a registered voter and someone that has resided within the city of Coos Bay for at least 1 year. As to process, history has shown since 1992 there are 4 different ways that council could choose to fill the vacancy. One, you could use the most recent general election results and vote in the person who got the next highest votes who did not make the council. Unfortunately, that is not an option for you because everyone that ran for election during the last general election was elected. So that one's out. You could leave the position vacant until the next general election, but that would be a considerable amount of time since the next election isn't until November of 2024. Councils in the past have decided amongst themselves, nominated someone, and by a majority vote, appointed that person. More often than not, the last option is what's generally used. The council agrees to accept applications, which is generally a letter of interest, conducted interviews, and then from that, selected a candidate to serve the remaining amount of term. With that information, I leave it up to you to direct staff on how you'd like to fill the position.
Well, I have been through a few of these, but I, under the circumstances, and I think you laid it out very well, Roger, that we should go out and take applications or letter of interest, as you suggested. The only thing that I'm concerned about is the time frame. Trying to put someone in oath by June 6th. I want to make sure that we get a good representation of anyone that might be interested. So if we could push that back a little bit would be my suggestion, but I'm not sure how the rest of the council feels. But I think we go out starting tomorrow and advertise the position, as you've stated here. And I think maybe we should go a little bit further than May 16th, I guess. So anyway, that would be my take.
I agree.
I'm concerned with the timeline being too quick. We have an election in the middle of that, and we wouldn't just be advertising end of this week. Yeah. I think it's not enough time.
Staff did discuss that very option today, and we were going to suggest if you wanted to have a longer timeline, you would we'd advertise beginning tomorrow and take applications through May 17th, have interviews on the 6th of June, and you could make your selection at that time.
Works
for me. It would give you nearly a month to take applications.
Yeah, and I think that, I'm still not sure there's enough time, but I think it's also, we wouldn't be tied to that if we want to extend it a little bit longer. I think we could. The concern I should say is what Stephanie mentioned. We got this election going on in between this, and it makes it a little bit convoluted, and people are focused on that instead of really understanding that we have this position available. The election's when? For the
May 16th.
Yeah.
I would prefer we push it out to May 31st or June 1st. Then that gives us a bit more time. It doesn't impact the elections. And that would give us, 6 weeks to advertise for applicants?
Yes, and if that was the desire of the council, then staff would probably suggest then you do your interviews at the second meeting of the month and select them. So we'll need time to vet applicants through the county to make sure that they are a qualified applicant.
Got it.
For the position.
Right.
They're registered voters and they have resided in the city.
How's everyone else feel? I mean, I support that. How's everyone else feel with that time frame?
Works for me.
Everyone?
Yeah.
Carmen?
That works better for me.
Okay. All right, I think that would work. Then we'll do the second meeting in June. Interviews, right? Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. That was easy. Okay, city manager report. Who's Roger and Nicole?
I think we're tag teaming this one.
Wow, okay.
So just a couple of quick things. I just want to remind you that several of us will be gone next week, at the beginning of the week for the League of Oregon Cities Spring Conference. So sadly, you'll have a Tuesday night off. But you can always watch this meeting once again if you want to. During your last meeting, it was reported to you that the Planning Commission was looking at making changes to short-term vacation rental process. Upon looking into that, there were comments that were made by a couple of planning commissioners, and it was related to the requirement that short-term vacation rental units moving forward have to incorporate sprinkler systems as a fire life safety, and they wanted to look at that requirement. At the last planning commission, staff, both the planning administrator and the building administrator, provided some education on the topic, and it really isn't an option for the planning commission to recommend or not recommend having those. That actually is a requirement through the state code. So that was it's a good education piece, but they're not looking at making any other changes.
Good.
So with that, I'll turn it over to my more than capable assistant.
I just have a couple things, maybe a little bit more community-minded. I remind everybody that the Bay Area Chamber of Commerce and the Oregon Bay Area Beautification Group is doing the 101 Brigade cleanup. That will be on the 29th. There is a flyer we can share with you guys. It's a little bit larger of an activity this year with some events. I think they're starting at the Mill Casino for a collections point, but we can send that out to you. We've been putting it in the Friday update as well. And then budget is just around the corner. We're going to be meeting on May 4th. Those budget documents have gone out to each of you, and then also the rest of the members who are on the budget committee. Definitely, if you have questions, you want to reach out and ask any of those, certainly can. Otherwise, be prepared on the 4th to bring those forth. I also understand that Christine sent out the menu, so it'd be handy if you haven't told her, let her know what kind of sandwich you like.
Oh,
Otherwise, you might not get something that you'd prefer. So that's all I had.
Okay, council comments. Carmen.
Well, I just wanted to kind of touch on the agenda itself and just say I'm really glad that we are focusing on housing and homelessness. This meeting is exactly what I kind of needed because it's something I think about daily and has been at the forefront of my experience as of late in terms of just interacting with victims of homelessness and having friends who are having struggles finding homes. And I'm just, I'm really looking forward to ways that we can help and continue the discussion and actually have some real actionable items that we can accomplish. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's working on this. It's very obvious that it's at the forefront of a lot of great minds and people are working real hard. And so for the members of our council and our community that are doing so and working really hard, I just want to say thank you because it's something that is very important and I think about daily. And I know that we're all interested in solving this problem or at least making major headway on it. So thank you on that note. That's pretty much all I have.
All right, thanks. Sarah?
Yeah, I've probably spent more time thinking about what I'm going to say tonight than I have in my time on this council. And I wrote out what I was going to say about 30 times, and it still doesn't sound right to me. And so I'm just going to say what's on my heart, which is that last week we had over 500 people at the Mill Casino attend a diversity, equity, and inclusion conference. And it was amazing to be together in a space. Lucinda opened the conference both days with a welcome and welcoming us into the Coquel Indian Tribal House and welcoming us into the community. And it was really wonderful. And it was really great to be together with community members in an environment where we were being educated about a variety of topics, from access for people with disabilities, to the Indian Child Welfare Act, to what it means to be a two-spirited person, to oppression and the tribal history of our area. It was awesome. At the same time, in our community, there were a couple of individuals that expressed really hateful language, both on radio and in social media, and it caused a group of students to not be able to gather in a safe place together, to explore identity, and to learn about the history of things like drag queens and what it means to be LGBTQIAS+. And these overt threats will not stand here. And it's important that we partner with our awesome law enforcement to make sure that these overt expressions of hate are stopped. And I want to challenge us as a council and as a city to raise the bar. I know we're already doing a lot and that we're out in the forefront of many of these things, but I want to challenge us to even do more, because we cannot continue to allow this hatred to happen in our community. And so I know, Chief, I contacted you after hours, and I think you were on vacation, and you responded, and I appreciate you for doing that, and I appreciate the work that's being done, but I think we can do more.
Thanks, Sarah.
Perfectly said.
Yes, very well said. And I think we do all need to stand up, and we all need to do more on this. And I was going to take my comments, but I'm just going to interact. And I was unfortunately unable to make it, but I hope it's an annual thing. I think it is. I will be there next year, and I hope the rest of us can be there. And I agree, we don't need that in our community. So thank you for those comments. Stephanie?
You're going to make me follow that?
Yes. That's why I wanted to get in there before you made those comments. Usually I'm following you.
Well, I guess then I'll start with what I was going to end with, and that is a reminder that it's important for all of us when we see something to say something. And so whether it's what Sarah has expressed, or whether it's something we see that needs to be addressed by staff, that, you know, cleaning up something, we need to hear from our community. That's who we're elected to represent. And if, rather than discussing it on social media, if you're just looking for validation, that's probably where you're going to get it. But where you're going to get action is where you actually bring it to people that can do something about it. And so I guess that's probably the best comment I can make on that. Just a couple of other things to mention. Nicole brought up the Oregon Bay Area beautification. If you need some practice for the 101 cleanup at the airport this weekend from 12 to 3, they have coordinated an effort with the National Honor Society from the high school in North Bend, as well as Coos Watershed and the airport district. And they will be eradicating some Scotch broom and French broom. I did not know that. There were actually 2 brooms this weekend, and they're meeting from noon to 3, assembling at Colorado and Arthur, and you'll probably see a bunch of cars there. And you can learn about how important it is to abate that particular noxious weed or noxious shrub that we have. So that is Saturday. Also, the farmers market I want to mention, because we won't be meeting again before the first farmers market opens on May 3rd in downtown Coos Bay. And so that will be happening. I believe that opens up at 9 a.m. on the first Wednesday and will continue through October. And then finally, my last comment is I think it's important for accountability, as you said, to make sure that we get a report regularly from the Houseless Pilot Project Committee. And if it's Andrew, just something that that lets us know that we're progressing forward, because it is such an important topic. And make sure that we get that report like we get from the high school or the Visitors and Convention Bureau or anything like that. But I think probably more regularly if we can. I don't know how often the council wants, but I would like to see that on our agenda. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Rob.
Well, since the library board chair is sitting in front of me and we have a meeting tomorrow, I felt like I should share the library statistics for the month of March. The library had 10,244 total visits. There were 171 new cards issued. They ran 52 programs with a program attendance of 1,372. There were 653 digital downloads and 11,352 wireless internet connections. So despite what you may read in the letters to the editor from certain people, the library is still very much an essential service for our community. And that's all I have.
You know, for anyone's information, if you have any of the Audible things that they have online, you got to call after your birthday or you can't get on. I have to do it every year. It won't give me access, and I'm going, what's the deal? So anyway.
Just email Sammy, that's what I do.
Okay, well, anyway, I call down and they take care of it, so Lucinda.
Well, Sarah, you're gonna make me cry, so I'm gonna try to not cry. It was a tremendous honor as a city councilor to stand up there, to talk about what DEI means to me personally, to talk about the accomplishments of the city, what we've done as a city. And I'd forgotten a few things. I had to email Roger, and he gave me a long list. And to also, as many in this room know, if you ever got to hear a speech from, or an invocation from my late husband, it was a gift. And to be able to stand in that space and remind people, had he been alive, he would have welcomed you into the house, right, of the Coquel Indian tribe. And to finish his remarks with always reminding us, he had told a story about basket weaving, and it was a reminder in this speech that the work that we're here to do is ours, but we always need to be reminded the work we're here to do is for all the people. And it's such a great message, right? And to your point, I think the work we've done at this council to serve on boards, to sit in on this dais, that's doing the good work. And I so appreciate your words. And I think hate is an awful thing. And I think the more open we are about it, and the more willing the more willing we are to speak up about it in a way that, as much as we want to scream and yell, it's about education, and it's about educating people and changing minds one relationship at a time. And I thank you for the work that you do on a daily basis in this space. And I also want to shift and pivot now. I walk on the boardwalk a lot, and I really want to commend the staff for those beautiful flagpoles that are lit up. They're absolutely beautiful. For me personally, Sarah, to see the three flags of our tribal governments, right, the ancestral homelands of three flags, that's the DEI work, right? That's the stuff that I get really excited about. And so I just want to commend the staff for that. And I look forward to other opportunities to improve the boardwalk. I did propose to Roger, I just planted a seed because I love planting seeds. There is a lot of grass there, and I'm always concerned about mowing it, watering it, and just the amount of staff time. So I wanted to throw out there as an option for the staff to consider, and maybe the council to consider, as we continue to develop that boardwalk. Perhaps small gravel, perhaps bark might be a better option. I think bark is probably the safer choice for us. But I think, again, we don't have to have the maintenance of someone mowing it. We don't have to worry about watering it. And so I just wanted to put it out there and put it on the record. And lastly, Roger, I just want to understand, I know we've talked about a cleanup that's going to happen at the end of this month. Do I understand this correctly, that on the water side, that is the side that the city owns, but on the track side, that's the side that the port owns, correct?
Yes and no. Actually, the water side, the port owns as well. We just have an easement over the top.
Okay. So we really manage the path,
We do.
right? And so any trash, because I do walk it a lot, any trash on either side would be the responsibility of the port. Is that correct?
Correct, although I believe our staff does pick up trash on the water side.
Okay.
And we did, when we met with the port director a few weeks ago, we talked about the upcoming cleanup.
Oh, good.
And getting access or permission for those participating in the event to be on in the rail yard.
Great. Could we take it one step further and ask the port if they have, like we do, a facilities department that cleans that up? Can you reach out to the port and see if they have someone on their staff that can continually clean it, so we're not just cleaning it once a year? I think as someone who is now walking that almost every day, I can see more and more trash, unfortunately, and I can see some of it picked up, but it would be great if we could reach out to the port and just let them know that at least one counselor is concerned about it.
We can.
Those are all my comments.
Maybe this is one thing where we appeal to the public as well. Instead of having to be reactive, that we be proactive and put our stuff in a receptacle instead of just throwing it out the window, or, maybe pleading to the public to do their part.
True. For that port, though, I mean, one of the issues is that it's hard to get in there because it's private property. They don't want to go in there except for one time a year. So I don't know what the answer is, but hopefully, maybe they have a solution for us. True.
My recollection of the berm for the port is that they don't own it when it needs repairs, but if we want to make repairs to it, we do have to ask them. I'll skip to something nice at the end, but the issue with the kids being scared out of holding their event, I feel like the area got better for a period of time about the LGBTQIA plus community, that it got safer. I remember when I was a kid in high school, early 2000s, growing up, being bisexual and being myself in the community, I got death threats. I got my car vandalized in the driveway of my house. People yell shit from their car, yell stuff from their car. Even happened after I came home from the military. Some people yelled at me outside of a business once. It took me a minute to realize those were people I went to high school with, and they never actually went anywhere. But it seemed like it got better for a while. But I remember during the commissioner's race, the commissioner's election, I got a call from a group in Bandon that's basically the pride group out there. And they called for advice because they were concerned about their safety to hold just a general meeting of people of similar lifestyles in that regard. And I had helped as one of the de-escalators at the Pride in the Park event, so they called me for that. That seemed like a concerning turning point where someone was linking the election to threats that were coming from people associated with an individual that was being elected. And I feel like folks have been emboldened towards that end since then. It is important that we stand up to that and make folks feel safe. And I think coordinating with Jamar, who in my head he's in charge of the Pride group here, to see how we can help. So if I had paid more attention to this, I might have been able to talk to him and see about stepping in to help ensure safety again. But that's something we do have to keep more attention to, I think. because it goes to some dangerous places. But on the happier side of things, I was late today because I was doing my practice for Dancing with the Stars. So the young lady that was in here earlier mentioned choir, and I did choir in high school, but I was told to write a paper for the final, so I was not good at choir. But they did convince me to dance for this thing because it benefits folks with developmental disabilities. It's a fundraiser. They got me to do, I'm going to be doing a swing dance to an Elvis song. I forgot what the song is, but my grandma's thrilled. And the event is this Saturday. Doors open at 6:30. Show starts at 7:30. I'll be a little like an eclipse. Don't stare directly at me. You'll go blind. General admission is $25. Seniors are $20. Youth $10. And you can cast extra votes for an extra $10. I would recommend voting for gold. That is my favorite. I was hoping John was dancing. I am highly disappointed, but hopefully next year.
Where is it?
Right. It will be at the Egyptian Theater, and if you go on the Star of Hope website, they currently have a tab at the end of their list on the right that says dancing. And if you click that, you can go in and sign yourself up to be present and watch the terror that will be me dancing.
I do believe that the first year that they held that, I was one of the...
You were one of the brave souls.
Yeah, I'm a terrible dancer. And had I known that you could have people purchase votes for you, I'm sure that I would have won. So even if you can't, you don't have to be there to purchase the vote. You can do it online.
This is true.
Please, go out there and...
You don't have to come see the horror show, but you can give them $10.
Councilor Kilmer, I think you were probably the impetus of adding that, right, to the...
I was upset because I didn't know. I would have rallied all my friends.
I heard that Rob Miles wants to come back next year to dance.
Excellent.
That's great.
I'll dance for you now if you want.
It is a fun event.
Drew, I just want to say that when I was in junior high choir, I was such a good singer that they asked me to be the page turner for the pianist.
I can relate. I'm good.
Well, I hope it's real successful, and I will sign up and try to. You can watch it virtually or watch it.
Maybe. I haven't tried to concern myself with how many people are going to watch this.
I don't think you can watch it virtually, but they will use your picture forever, and it will be out there somewhere.
Gold is in the competition.
I
so
shock myself every time I actually had somebody ask me if I was dancing again this year, and I said, no, but they keep using the picture I'm in. I wish you very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for doing it. Anyway, I appreciate the council's comments on the DEI. I think it's important that's been talked about to support that, stand up to it, and I think that's the best way for us to move forward. So let's keep that in mind. Also, the cleanup on 101 beautification, this has been going on for quite a while, and I appreciate everyone doing it. I won't be able to participate, but we were able to do John Toppit's, which was successful, and I appreciate that group getting together, and they really started a trend, I think, in this community, in North Bend and Coos Bay. I remember John and Terry Whitty being on this 101 beautification years ago and dragging me out there and a lot of the counselors to do that, and so I appreciate everyone participating. Also, I think it's important that Brian Moore came from the hospital. We talked about interacting with the other community aspects of where the support, which we've done already. The hospital, I think, is important, and we'll be doing it with North Bend and the other entities throughout the community. One of these days, we should do the school boards, get involved. So that would be another thing. And as Carmen mentioned, and I think the rest of us, let's get this right. We will support the Director Office of Homeless Coordination for the Staff Support Advisory Committee. But it's going to need a lot of support. I appreciate what we have going on with some, but it's going to take a lot more. We have it's a project that's facing us, and it's never going to go away. It's just how we can accomplish it and make it better. And so I think it's a step in the right direction. And this housing, was specifically housing production strategy, is a step also to help with that. I also want to reiterate what Lucinda said about the boardwalk, I walk there also, and to see the, just not the flagpoles, but other things happening down there, so it's great. So, anyway, thank you. We don't have an urban renewal agency meeting, so we will adjourn this council meeting. I want to thank everyone for attending. Have a good evening.
Meeting.